of you ever been to the state of Nebraska as a tourist? From 2019 until this past February, Nebraska's tourism campaign used the following slogan: Nebraska, honestly, it's not for everyone. They discontinued that slogan because apparently that slogan wasn't for everyone. And yet, even the critics had to acknowledge that it was effective in what it was set out to do: boost awareness of Nebraska as a tourist destination. Out-of-state tourism had been extremely low, so they came up with that slogan out of a sense of desperation. The campaign included billboards featuring ironic quips such as, "Lucky for you, there's nothing to do here," and "Nebraska, famous for flat, boring landscape." On the same billboards, however, were pictures of people enjoying Nebraska's unique scenery and attractions. And then, at the bottom of each billboard was the attention-grabbing slogan: Nebraska, honestly, it's not for everyone. Just as there are millions of people who are unwilling to visit Nebraska for their next vacation because they assume Nebraska is not for them, there are millions of people who assume Jesus and the church are not for them either. This has always been the case. What I glean from the gospel lesson this morning is that Jesus isn't for everyone. Even then, when people could experience him up close and personal, there were people who took a hard look at him and said, "No, he's not for me." On this occasion, people are having difficulty trying to understand what he means when he talks about eating his flesh and drinking his blood. The general consensus in the crowd is that this is difficult to understand. Who can accept it, they ask. Jesus hears the murmuring in the crowd. He knows people are shocked and maybe even offended by these words. And yet, he doesn't back down. He tries to explain that he isn't promoting cannibalism, but he has encountered a language barrier. Words often fail us when we try to speak about the things of God. As Jesus says to these skeptical listeners, "The words I have spoken to you are spirit and life." Even with that caveat, many of his disciples, according to John, find this too difficult to understand. So they take a pass on Jesus' mission and ministry and head for home. Jesus, it seems, is not for everyone. But his closest friends continue to believe in him. From all their faults, with all their lingering questions and doubts, the original 12 disciples, including Judas Iscariot for now, are not going anywhere. Simon Peter, the one who is always the first to express his opinion, speaks for all of them by telling Jesus that there's no one else they would rather be with. They see him as the Holy One of God, which is his way of saying, "Jesus, you are for us." He might not be for everyone, it seems, but he is for you or me, or else we wouldn't be here today. Even if we also have a difficult time understanding his comment about eating his flesh and drinking his blood, we aren't going anywhere. As Catholics, we understand his words in a way that bridges the literal meaning of his words with the spiritual. We call it transubstantiation, which means, as you know, that the bread and wine is consecrated and thus converted to the substance of the Eucharistic elements, the body and blood of Christ. We believe that what we ingest is only the appearance of bread and wine. Honestly, because of that teaching, Catholicism is not for everyone. Jesus and his church is not for everyone, or so they think. I guess if you're not interested in spiritual vitality and growth, then Jesus and his church are not for you. If you're not interested in the movement of God's Spirit among us, then Jesus and his church are not for you. If you're not interested in being equipped and strengthened to help wounded people who live in a broken world, then Jesus and his church are not for you. If you're not interested in salvation, redemption, forgiveness, mercy, and grace, then Jesus and his church are not for you. If you're not interested in community support and fellowship, then Jesus and his church are not for you. If you're not interested in a sense of belonging, receiving encouragement, and sharing a purpose with other human beings, then Jesus and his church are not for you. If you're not interested in learning to care for the marginalized, the outcast, the downtrodden, the lost, and the forgotten, then Jesus and his church are not for you. If you're not interested in Jesus' teaching that promotes love, compassion, peace, and justice, then Jesus and his church are not for you. If you're not interested in the message of hope for the resurrection and the future with God, then Jesus and his church are not for you. I assume that maybe there are some unchurched people here in our community who assume our parish is not for them either. Our slogan could be, Holy Family Catholic Church. Honestly, it's not for everyone. But I would say to that, they're probably right.